What's up, PhysEd friends? This is Ben, and today is another episode of PhysEd Q A. So today I got one of my most common questions, which is, how do you do your grades? Before we talk about grades, I am going to take you through my process, which is pretty simple and not techie at all. Let's just set a few ground rules and kind of talk about what grades are for. So what is the purpose of grades? I always like to remind any parents, students, or other teachers that I'm discussing this with that grades are communication. That's all they are. It doesn't have anything to do with whether you like a student or not. Grades are communication on whether or not that student has met the standard or your criteria for a grade or not. So there are three basic areas that as physical education teachers we're grading students, or criteria that we have to hopefully get students to. And those are in the physical domain, which is skills like, can you throw a ball 30 feet and hit a wall in second grade? Or can you perform locomotor skills like skipping, galloping, sliding without running into people and finding open space in first and kindergarten? So those physical skills that we work on, that's the physical or psychomotor domain. Then you have the cognitive domain, which is knowledge. Do you have the knowledge of rules of a game? Can you apply those rules in gameplay? Do you know the cues for different skills that's going to help you perform that skill in the correct way? Those are cognitive domains. Those are things that you could assess with a tool like Plickers, or if you want to do like a paper pencil type test. Then you have the affective domain, which in my opinion is the most important domain. That's things like, do you take responsibility for your actions? Do you follow the class expectations? Do you know how to use good sportsmanship? Do you know the reason why we're here? And that's the social skills, the life skills, the things that really lead to a student's success down the road. So those are our three domains. A grade should be a communication to that student or that parent on how they're performing in whatever of those three domains you are assessing. Now, for me personally at the elementary level, in my specific situation, we in kindergarten through second grade do something called common assessments. So we have standards-based report cards. Every elementary school teacher in the district assesses each kindergarten, first, and second grade student on the same standards. We have about 5 or 6 standards for each grade level, and they're different for each one. Now, are those the only things we're assessing kids on? No, but those are the things that are going on the report card. So for each of those standards, like as an example in second grade, can a student overhand throw a ball and hit a wall from 30 feet? So in second grade, that's one of the standards on the report card. So when a student is in second grade, on their report card, they will have either an U for unable to meet, or a P for progressing, or an M for meets expectations. So that's communicating to that parent and that student, hey, your student can hit a wall from 30 feet, or they're progressing towards that goal, or they are totally unable to meet that goal. Now, the rubric that we use says they can hit the wall 3 out of 5 attempts counts as a meets. So if they hit it 2 or 1 out of 5 attempts, or they do not use the correct throwing cues, then that is a progressing. If they can't hit it at all, then that would be an unable to meet. So that's an example of the way that we assess our kindergarten through second students. Now, our third through fifth students, which is how we used to do every student, we're kind of piloting these standard-based report cards for kindergarten and second to see how it goes. For third through fifth, we just give one grade. So I give either a U, unable, or P, progressing, or meets for each student per 9 weeks. So we assess every 9 weeks. So everything that we do, I am trying to collect at least one piece of data in each class. Now that could be the student followed the class expectations. We do a self-assessment every day. You can check the link down below if you don't know about the self-assessment we do. So that's more affective, responsible, where you follow directions. Then we also sometimes we'll do like a skill assessment, like how long can you jump rope, or do you know how to correctly throw a ball? So we'll play a game and I'll do a quick checklist of check, correct throwing form for each kid while they're playing the game, things like that. Or we could do a Plickers assessment if we're doing cognitive. Now, all that sounds super complicated, and it can be as complicated as you want to make it. But remember, if you're teaching elementary school, like me, for example, I have 550 students. I see those students 9 times in a grading cycle. So I'm trying to first take care of management, second take care of my instruction, and then third is assessment. So first thing I want to make sure is I have my management on point. I have my students organized. I have my behavior focused on learning, and we are using good sportsmanship. If you don't have your management straight, then it doesn't matter what your assessments are, because your assessments aren't going to work if you can't manage your class to do the assessment. Second thing you want is to have really good instruction. Are the things that you're teaching your students actually leading to learning and focusing on the outcomes that you want them to focus on? So then after you do that, after you have good instruction, you can assess your students, and that can inform your instruction. So through assessment, I might be able to find out that my instruction is actually not that great and my kids are not learning the things that I want them to do. So that when you hear people say assessment informs instruction, my assessment can be for me as a teacher to find out if I'm teaching my students. It doesn't even have to be related to a grade at all. Assessment for learning can be for me to assess my students, to let them know where they're at, and then also that informs my instruction to let me know if I'm getting to my kids and teaching my students the things that I want them to learn. Assessment of learning would be allowing my students to see if they've learned what they are supposed to do. So remember, you got those psychomotor, affective, and cognitive domains. So that's just a quick overview of grading and assessment and the purpose behind it. I think that's an important conversation to have before we jump into it. And before we get into this, disclaimer, the way that I do grades is very, very basic, very, very simple. I'm trying not to overcomplicate it. I don't use technology very much in my grading process, because I have so many students that it would be very complicated for me to input 500 students into any kind of grading system and then re-import those into my grading software that my school uses. So the way that I do grades is very simple. It's paper pencil. So let's take a look at what 9 weeks would look like with my grading system. All right, here we go. All right, so here I got a printed out grade sheet, just an example of what I use for grades. Now, if you'll check this little bottom corner right here, this is my set of codes that I use, just common codes that I will put in each box so I can kind of monitor behavior and be able to tell parents if their student gets a specific grade in any behavioral areas. I'll be able to more specifically tell them what that student got that grade for. So for example, if they're not following directions, I'll just put it NFD. If they do it 2 times, I'll put it ×2. So then let's zoom out real quick and let's get a basic picture of a 9 weeks. So what would a 9 weeks look like? Now, so the different areas you have are, you've got obviously your class name here. So that would be the teacher's name. Then you have the day of the week. I have a different group for each day of the week. And then this would be your grade. So maybe this is 5th grade. And then the time, so how long your class is. So maybe like 12:45 to 1:35 if you had like 50-minute classes. So then you got your students. So we got Johnny, Samantha, Billy, Jenny, just as an example. So obviously you're gonna have lots more students, and then you have your home-based spots right here. This is what I just make a quick note so I can remember what I did that day. This would be the date. So maybe this is like the beginning of the year, so like August 15th. And then we did hula hut relays. Okay, so that's just so I can see what we did, make a quick note to myself, and then the date. A quick example of what it might look like. You got, obviously you're gonna create your own rubrics and things like that, but just for an example of some things that I might do, is my goal is to have every piece of data on this sheet. So I want to be able to look at what I did that day, so look back at the whatever we were doing that day, and then I want to be able to look up and see how each student did that day, just usually with a simple checklist or a rubric or a simple task they did. So for example, right here, maybe this was hula hut relays. You got TWP, that means talking without permission. One student had FF, which is flip-flops. And then 2 pluses, that means their team won twice, or 1 plus, their team won once. Now, those pluses, depending on what we did that day, can mean something different. So right here, I know that we did pacer tests. These are all students' pacer scores, so they're written in there. And then I might like circle the ones that are in the healthy fitness zone with a marker that works. This would be an example of if we do an endurance challenge, like our jump rope challenge. 1 minute club, 2 minute club, 3 minute club. I might do a note like minus SK for minus skill if I know that a student needs help with something. So then I'll know that next class I can help that student out when I have a free minute, when I have the students in the warm up or doing an independent activity. I can help that student, give them some one-on-one time because they need a little extra help. This would be an example of like the throwing assessment for our 2nd grade class. So they get, let's say they get 4 throws, an X is a hit and a circle is a miss. So I know right now that this kid got 3 out of 4. This kid missed all 4. This kid got 4 out of 4, and this kid got half. So it's just a simple way to keep all your data in one place. So then at the end of the 9 weeks, when I'm looking at the entire 9 weeks, it all fits on one line right here. Not following directions times 2. Right here will be a locomotor, so minus skip. That means this student needs to work on their skip. This student needs to work on their leap. NP half means they didn't participate for half the time. And then maybe we had a tournament and then this student got 1st place in the 4-square tournament. This student got 2nd place in the 4-square tournament. So those are just pieces of data that can help me when I'm looking back at grades to see how students are doing. So anytime a parent wants to meet with you about a student's grade, I found that it's helpful to always start off by giving them a little bit of perspective. Every parent meeting I've had about students' grades has always started with, hey, just to give you some perspective, I teach 550 students. So I'm responsible for grading 550 students every 9 weeks. And every time that I say that, their response is, wow, like I never really thought about it like that before. After we get that out of the way, I try to remind them that grades are, like we said, communication. So it doesn't have anything to do with whether I like your student or not. All it has to do with is where your student's at and completing the goal or the tasks that we've been working on in physical education class. Another thing that you can do to differentiate your grades is add comments to your report card. So I try to, anytime I give anybody anything under a meets expectations, I try to give a comment to give as much communication, remember that's what grades are about, to that student and that parent as possible. Usually I try to provide them some insight into why their student might not be meeting that standard. Maybe they're doing an awesome job and they just need more practice. Maybe they're a very capable student, but sometimes they get sidetracked and get off task and they have trouble following instructions or listening during that instructional time. So the more information you give your parents, the better. The more you try to keep it positive. If you give a negative comment, give a positive comment as well. The better it's going to be, and the more you're going to come off as someone that's trying to be helpful, and as opposed to somebody who is negative and trying to bash a student. Remember whose team you're on. Your job is to try to uplift your kids and help them become those confident movers, to learn as much as they can, to live an active lifestyle for a lifetime. So that's just a basic overview of how I do my grades. I try to keep it as simple as possible. I want all my information right there on one page for each 9 weeks. And the last thing I want is to be looking at my roster, trying to give grades, and it's totally blank. So I just try to gather as much information as I can. Now, are there a lot of really cool techie ways to keep track of your grades and do grades for physical education? Yes, I'm going to link a few of those different systems down below. You can go as far down the rabbit hole as you want to. I've just found that for me, keeping it simple allows me to use my mind space and my time to focus on that management and that instruction piece. So I try to make sure I have assessment in place to make sure that I'm informing my instruction and actually teaching kids the things I want them to learn and seeing if they're learning them. But at the same time, I'm remembering that I only see my kids once a week for 50 minutes. And so I try to salvage as much time as I can for that management instruction piece by using simple assessments that save time and that are non-techie, so there's as few problems as possible to possibly go wrong with any assessments that I do. And long story long, that's how I do my grades. I hope that was helpful. I hope it's helpful to see somebody else's process. Check the links in the description if you want to dig a little bit deeper. Hit that subscribe, hit that like if this was helpful, and share it with your friends if you think it might be helpful for someone else. Hope you guys have an awesome day. Have fun and teach on. Peace. What's up, guys? Thanks for watching the video. I wanted to let you know this video is sponsored by the PE Specialist Membership Community, where teachers have access to great tools like unit plan samples, station signs, trainings, tutorials, and even community forums. If you think the membership might be a good fit for you, you can head over to thepespecialist.com/info for some more information. Hope you guys have an awesome day.